everybody. Welcome back to the Primas podcast. I am Cindy, and that's my prima Jess.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Primas podcast channel. Thanks for tuning in again. Thanks, Mom. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, for real, Tia Gloria, we love you. You're special. So today we have a banger, and I'm just going to start all of our topics like this because this one's a good one. It's talking about human behavior, but as it relates to aggression. So I feel like that's cool, right? Like that's like different.
Yeah, because we usually talk about the positive sides of like psychology and human behavior. And I think this for once, we rarely touch on the negative, right? Aspects of it, but we're trying to be positive when we talk about it. But I like how this is a negative, like emotion, essentially.
Or it's how we refer to it in the past as a contrast.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the other side of us. And although aggression sounds like it, I think it takes a negative rep. Mm-hmm. The book, Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene, this is our part 2. And we really encourage, if you are a behavior enthusiast or if you're looking for something to read, that is a really good book because it talks a lot about our different behaviors, aggression being one of them. And the cool part is, from an evolutionary perspective, just to kind of start us off, aggression is there as a defense mechanism. It was there to defend food, resources to like potential mates, and for our own safety. So like the reproduction, right? Like the survival of our genes. And so aggression, I think it takes a bad rep because we don't have a handle on the horse, AKA it's there to benefit us. And if we learn how to take control over it, it can be very beneficial. So, Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, Prima Cindy was inspired by this chapter. And I believe it was chapter 16 of our Laws of Human Nature book. So, yeah, we've talked about Laws of Human Nature. When it came to emotions, we talked about chapter 1, and we just jumping now into chapter 16 because Prima Cindy was inspired. So take it away, Prima.
So first of all, I just want to say, just kidding. Imagine if I had like my real PowerPoint and then, but anyways, shout out to PowerPoint, like from the year 2000s, like all of that. Well, I guess we're still in the year 2, but you know what I mean? Like until like, I don't know, 2015, like when people would add like all of the effects and you were in class and the teacher was like, and we were like, sweet, because then we don't got to go until they finish, which looks like it's going to take a minute.
All those little effects.
And some people would not mean it. They were like really proud, like, dude. And then it's like every single letter coming at you one by one. And it's like,
like a 3-minute slide. Yeah. And it's like just the title and like a sentence. And it's like you had the shutter, the swirl effect. Yeah. Those were.
Ish. We need to bring those back. I used to be very proud of my PowerPoints. I don't know if the audience received them well, but I was always like, yeah, check that bullet point. And we would just read off of it. And the teacher would be like, don't do that. But anyways. So sorry, I don't know how to handle when my hair is down, you guys, but my scalp is tender. Okay. Anyways. So Chapter 16 is see the hostility behind the friendly facade.
Facade.
Oh, it's facade.
Head of.
I say facade.
There was a little thing under it, and I'm like,
yeah.
How do you pronounce this? So facade. I like that. It's very
sophisticated.
Yeah. Okay, so it's basically saying in a lot of the chapters of the book, he talks about the mask that we put on as humans. It's a behavior trait that we've kind of learned since we're little to, I guess for me, it's like we're hypocrites. When we're presenting ourselves to others, we're not presenting ourselves in our authentic ways, is what he's saying. He's saying that we put on a mask depending on who we're with. And I think we can relate to that. Like, think when you're with your family, you're one type of person, or when you're at work, you're different. You're not as relaxed or in public, right? Like all of these different things. So putting a mask on doesn't mean necessarily a bad thing. It just means we should be aware of the mask that we put on so that we can work on some traits that are like, be authentic to yourself, because that's essentially going to set you free.
Yeah. And I think when people say that, like, oh, you're fake, and I hate when people say that, because it's like, no, we're not being fake. We're just not being ourselves around you. We choose to like put this mask or this like barrier in between us because I don't want to vibe with you, but when people are like, oh, you're being fake, and it's like, why? Because I laugh with that person and I don't crack jokes with you, like, then why aren't you questioning your energy? And I'm just kidding, but I hear what you're saying, that mask.
But so the thing, to kind of argue that point, what Robert Greene says is that we need to not care what other people think. And I think you might be talking about something different, but like, we should be able to be ourselves, and even to that person be like, honest, like, I'm not being fake. I just don't like you. But it's nothing personal, but I don't like you. We're not that straightforward. We're just not. We're too afraid of conflict and confrontation. And that comes from a lot of fears. It doesn't mean that things are going to lead to confrontation, but we're like, and we don't know how that manifests. And one way is through different styles of aggression. So he talks a lot about the sophisticated aggressor. So he introduces this point and says that the sophisticated aggressor is someone who's like, I kind of studied John D. Rockefeller for this part because he talks about him. And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I've heard of him, but I don't know his story. So I was like, and he had a very like, by all means necessary approach to old school business. And so you can imagine. And so, but the thing with him is that he was calculated, but also his approach was by all means necessary. I will destroy the competition. And that's like a really like, whoa, he wasn't like, hey, there's money for everybody. He's like, no, I want all the money. And so that style is, he calls sophisticated aggressor. Let's see, people like,
before we jump into it, I do like Robert Greene's style. In all the chapters I've read, he usually starts that chapter with this figure that we're all very well known of, you know what I mean? And then he tells a lot about their history or details, and then after he breaks the other side of that chapter is like examining their human behavior, and depicting it and saying like, okay, well, remember when I referenced that, like, this is why he became like, he was so young, right? Like John D. Rockefeller was so young, like 18, I think, when he started investing in himself and like trying to do his hustle. And I was just like, whoa, I had no idea how young he was when he started. And I've heard that name prior, but I mean, the most common thing, where I've known that last name from is like in New York City, there's a whole huge building called the Rockefeller Center. And that was like, used to be the highest building in New York, right before all the other skyscrapers were. So that's where like my knowledge of him came about. But so I like his style in that aspect. He like draws us in with different characters throughout history, right? And like points out their human behavior.
Yes, that's why I really love and appreciate Robert Greene as an author, because that's how most of his, I haven't read all of his books, but I've read Mastery, The Art of Seduction, and the 48 Laws of Power, and this one, The Laws of Human Nature. And I fell in love with Mastery, which was the first book I read of his, because he does exactly that. He says, this is how this person mastered their craft. And he presents the story of that person, so you get emotionally hooked. But then you also find that part in you that relates. He does that really well with the 48 Laws of Power.
I really want to read that one.
Oh, it's so good. You're going to like it. He talks a lot about the dark side, but like he talks about leaders in the world, like from history. So although I don't consider Hitler a leader, he was a very prominent, he did a lot of movement, psychologically speaking.
Yeah.
And so he's he's just an outlier that a lot of people are going to reference when you're talking about extreme behavior, but also to say, this
We're
is
just
how
examining. Yeah,
no,
we're just examining his behavior. Like we're not condoning, what he did, but like like just analyzing like what he did in that time.
yeah. And so his style is that, he connects it back to like, this is what he did. Even Genghis Khan, who, that's how I learned about him, was through that book. He did like a lot of like warfare in China, and it was kind of like a small rebel group. And it's just like at the time, like the way that he was able to move, and like, this is how he did it. And so he breaks down the psychology, and it's like, oh, that's awesome. Because you can use elements, you could just learn about human behavior more, where you can be like, okay, that person. And that relates back to the aggression chapter, where he talks about some people use their aggression in horrible ways, and some people use it in beautiful ways if we learn to tap in. So human aggression stems from underlying insecurity. We've mentioned that a lot before in like different types of like fears. We talk a lot about fears and different common human behaviors. And so this can be obvious sometimes, right? Like when someone's really aggressive, it's like you kind of step back and be like, and you have to think like, what is this person really upset at? And remember that movie with Adam Sandler and the little boy? What was it called? Big Daddy?
Oh yeah, where
It was called Big Daddy?
Yes.
So I remember he's getting into like a little back and forth with someone, and the guy goes, F you or something, I don't remember. And then Adam Sandler goes, you're not mad at me, you're mad at your father. And that's literally the perfect way to say childhood trauma. Maybe it's not your father. In his situation, it just happened to be like he was mad at his father also, but it's a good way to explain like aggression and antisocial behavior, which will lead to like serial killers or like other types of things. Genetics can also be involved. A lot of studies show that those children were also really badly mistreated. And so again, kind of explains like, why would someone act so violently? Some people will say they're evil, and it's just like, well, also, I don't believe I can call someone evil, because there's too much behind. Like for me, it's like, given his life, this was kind of bound to happen. It's horrible, but also,
yeah,
saying it's evil is not putting like a name on it.
You were talking about like John D. Rockefeller and like the way he was, right? The way what was the positive term you used? Not positive, but what was that aggression word? I had it highlighted. An example of what kind of aggressor was it?
Oh, he was a sophisticated aggressor.
Sophisticated aggressor, yeah. Which I don't think when I was reading it correlated with anger or in a negative connotation, right? It was very positive. And like when we had mentioned, when we started talking about this, to me, when I hear the word aggression, to me, it's like anger or like lashing out or like not having control of our emotions, But when he was describing John D. Rockefeller in that, using that term, sophisticated aggressor, I was like, oh shit, like that's actually positive, and the way he handled his business, where he literally mastered removing his emotion from business, and that partnership. So Prima, if this ever doesn't work out, just know I'm coming from a sophisticated aggressor side. Okay.
Yes.
But I like how he broke that down. And again, I never thought to make that connection that aggression could be positive. But yeah, if you want to break that down a little bit.
Yeah, there's like a positive twist to our contrast. And I love, because he talks so much about our dark side, it's like the contrast, whatever you want to call it. We have those emotions that we call others like, oh, what a horrible person, or how judgmental of them. That person's a narcissist. All of these things that we point to judge others, his whole idea is saying you have those tendencies also. So Correct. Check yourself, because really you can only lead by example. You can't change anybody. And he says it a lot in the book, like, man, create space, or like, don't waste your time trying to change some of these behavior types. Don't take it personal. That's something we add. It's just look at it for what it's worth. Like, man, this person like has these behavior tendencies, is disrespectful, is passive aggressive, is whatever the behavior is that's causing you issues. You still got to handle business and take care of yourself. But he's saying, don't be judgmental. Like, understand that person, like, being judgmental isn't only going to affect that person, it's going to affect us as well. That's what I like, is that it explains, learn to see some of these negative behavior traits in a way that is like, well, if that person would have been born in a different, more healthy environment, he would have been the type to, she would have been the type to, you know what I mean? Like, be more aggressive in business. It doesn't have to be just business. In accomplishing your goals, if your goal was to get on an island and live in a little hut by the beach for the rest of your life and you accomplish that, that's what it's about.
Yeah. And then I like the term, I don't know if you've used it because of the Robert Greene books you read, but you call that contrast side of us our shadow. And I really like that aspect, or that term, that describes that, because a lot of people, when we say contrast, it's like, well, what does that mean? But when we have our shadow, everyone has a shadow, and I think a lot of people forget, like, oh no, I don't have a shadow, I'm not capable of that. And it's like, no, we really all are.
Yes, that's a good point, because we really all are, from an evolutionary perspective. Our species, like all species on this planet, I think we can all agree, are here, have very strong hormonal or chemical drives from a very microcellular level. I don't know the language, but like to reproduce, to, to continue the survival of our genes. All of our behavior, as I'm learning, as I'm like finding some of these things out, is like, it's not, the shadow side is not a bad side. We don't know how to control the regular side or the shadow. We don't know how to control it. And so these behaviors come out and they're negative, but we're blaming our lack of control almost, right? Like, he calls you out and says, no, that's normal to be aggressive, especially under these conditions.
Yeah, and I like how he described that, again, that sophisticated aggressor. And like you said, we when we're reading it, we're like, oh, like we've done that, like we find it very relatable. And when it comes to the work environment one, I've never seen myself as like, I have to be the leader, I have to be the boss. But he said, like, we've seen that in our coworkers, and I've been in a very political, like, in work environments where people are like, well, I don't care, I'm going to do whatever I have to do. And I've never gotten angry with them, but I've respected, like, okay, I see what you're doing and I'm making that observation, but I'm like, I know I can't trust this person, like I'm making those observations myself and I see what they're trying to do and I respect their goals, because they have that motivation. Like, no, I'm going to be the boss one day, I'm going to be the manager, I'm going to be the CEO. And I think that was his mentality, and look what it got him to be like the most, like, I think I read he was the first billionaire of our time.
The richest man in the world. Yeah.
And I was just like, whoa. And he was so young and he accomplished all that in 20 years. So I just thought that was very trippy, I think he was like a family man too and all that. And that name is still very well known. If you're a Rockefeller, like, you're golden.
Yeah. He created so much wealth. Yes. And so that's looking at it from a business perspective. I remember my mom used to say that she didn't like certain business from different cultures, like that see business in a very cold way where they remove the emotion. Like, he was a big deal here in America, but I'm sure in other countries where they practice a more aggressive, like, well, this is how we run things anyways. That's kind of like, you look at it like, man, that's horrible, right? Because all you care about is the money. And so Robert Greene is saying, like, sure, you can think that, but also look at what he accomplished. And I kind of like how he always has that. He explains the shadow side very well. And I got the word contrast from Esther Hitch, if anybody follows, but that's like another spiritual, like, speaker type person. The other one he talks about is passive aggression. We've talked about passive aggression.
Passive aggressive.
What he heated up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, being passive aggressive before. And I want to give some examples, but he gets into deeper examples where I'm like, oh, to even that extent, you're demonstrating passive aggression. And so do you have an example for passive aggressive?
As you were saying that, yeah, I only thought of you and your examples. Just
Okay.
kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I don't
do it.
Passive aggressive is like, no, off memory, I can't think.
It's like when someone, I see this a lot in emails or in text messaging or like written communication, I guess, where people are like, I'm not going to be direct. I'm going to beat around the bush and try to make them feel dumb instead of being direct. Or if someone offended you, instead of being direct and saying, hey, that wasn't cool, what the hell? That person's going to like beat around the bush, but in a conniving way. They're not going to be direct because it's passive, right? They're not going to direct aggression. Maybe in a healthy way can be like, hey, like that upset me. Can we talk about it? Or how can we figure out how to work together? Whatever. Passive aggressive is not solutions based because you're not confronting the issue. You're going around it. You're being passive. You're like, let me pass by this place. So, so he says that. Oh, and one more thing about the sophisticated aggressor. They don't play fair and they lack empathy. So that's why the Rockefeller guy.
Successful?
Yeah.
I would say he was so successful because you don't feel bad for like, okay, well, I'm going to take this job from you, Cindy, and I don't care that you have a family and you're a single mom. Like, I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah. And I like that he explains that because again, that's to say like, I couldn't do something like that. Like it has to be really in your calling to, I'm not judging, but like, that's pretty interesting, right? Because I'm not like that. I'm very inclusive, almost to a fault where I'm like, bring it back, chill. Like you need to focus on yourself. Or I guess I used to be, but yeah, I think that style is still interesting because there are people like that. And it's cool to understand like, dang, this person must have, first of all, that's their call. That's something in them. And they, they're a little hardcore. Stay away, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's their passion.
So passive aggression is the human fear of direct confrontation. So it's an indirect form of aggression. One example that he gives is that he says, people who practice being passive aggressive is that they show subtle superiority. Some examples are showing up late to a meeting all the time, not just a meeting. Let's think outside the box. If you are someone, or if you know someone, because I didn't ever relate that's always late. The only time I thought about this, how it related to me, was when I was a teacher in high school, and the high school students, the ones that would come late, if you remember, I don't know if you remember, but like when you're a teenager and those groups of kids that were like, I don't care, they were demonstrating like, I don't care, I have better things to do, I'll show up when I want. And, they're teenagers. For me, it's like, I expect it. But, as adults, we do these behaviors also. And so when someone's like constantly showing up late to something, it's kind of a sign of passive aggression. And I never would have thought that. And they might not be doing it on purpose, but the message they're sending is my time is more important. Whether they know it or not, right? Some people really like are so unorganized and they're just like always running late. And they're not doing it to intentionally hurt someone else. But what they're giving off is, I don't value your time or mine because I'm also wasting my time. I wasn't on time, whatever. Another form of passive aggression is the blame shifter. So this is the person that might say like a harsh joke. And then when the other person's like, okay, what the F? Like that was a shot, right? Or whatever. The person's like, can't you take a joke? Oh my God, like they flip it and reverse it. And you're like, wait, what? For me, that was in the past, I was so easy to like get easily manipulated because I'd be like, I guess it's my, like I would get so confused until I started to learn about psychology. And now I can read it and I can be like, okay, it kind of takes away the emotion when I already know this person's behavior patterns. It's like, I know where this is going. So
yeah,
I
and
love psychology. You can predict human behavior.
exactly. And you can make the observation, you're able to step back and like not feed into it, because I've seen that. I've seen it at work, well, mostly at work, but I've also seen it within amongst family or friends
Everybody.
where they just do that. And it's like, why can't you just tell me how you're feeling, And I like the quotes he does. He does quotes like ever so often in the chapter. And he even starts one by saying like, the power of like controlling all this is in the power of communication. So if they're doing it so indirectly, it's like, why can't you just tell me how you're feeling? Like, why is it so hard to utter these words out of us? Like, Cindy, you messed up, you dropped the ball. Like, let's come up to a solution and figure it out. But it's always when like we drop the ball that people are like, no, I didn't do it. And it drives me crazy. I'm like, okay, I dropped the ball. So now that we've resolved whose fault it is, it's mine. Let's move forward and come up with a solution, because that's taking like an hour or 3 days of my time.
Yeah.
Just going back and forth in these redundant emails, and I'm just like, I'd just like to nip it in the bud, trim the fat, and move on from it. So tell me how you're feeling, and then I can like hold them back to that.
And that's part of the solution, is to be brave enough in these moments and to practice that, because I'm more direct, but I try to stay on top of it lately because I am trying to be better at, communication and just staying true to myself. And a part of how do we get in control of these shadow emotions is by being brave, like facing them, being uncomfortable. And sometimes I still do. Like I'll send messages or whatever, and I'm like, Cindy, you did nothing wrong, because I'm so conditioned to be like, is everything okay? And now I'm like, no, like just communicate. And I'm operating from a place of love and respect. And whatever I do, and if it doesn't come off that way, or if I did do something wrong, I love to make an example of myself, because so many people are so afraid of admitting that they're wrong, because and that comes from a place of like longing acceptance. Some people have that more than others. Some people, like, I think I'm pretty confident in saying like, I don't need to be accepted when I walk into a room or whatever, but I've worked so much on myself, and I still do. And some people, kind of never tap into that. And so they don't even know that they're giving off that behavior. A lot of people aren't conscious of, how am I coming off? We don't stop and think, how am I coming off? We've never observed ourselves. We've always looked outward.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I think part of the solution is being brave when you feel like you can be, and not in a way that's going to put you in an irresponsible place, but like we need to start looking at taking risks in a different way, not from a fear-based way, from a, like, for example, social media. Sometimes we question, what are we going to put up? What are people going to think? Sometimes just do it. If you like it, just do it, walk away, because that's facing your fears. People are going to talk. And we've said this in different chapters, like, you are going to get hate. That's just, we don't all have control of our emotions. So it's going to happen. And there was one time, Prima, we were going to the airport. I think I was dropping you off. And we were talking about what, that saying, like, I don't trust no one, or we don't trust no one, or whatever. And it kind of stuck with me because no one had ever asked me specifically, I guess how you asked. Or I guess we started talking about it, and I'm like, we don't trust anyone. We have issues. I always say I have mom, dad issues. I've worked on a lot of them, but there's just a lot of little stuff that I don't always see that I'm still catching, right? And so I say that I don't trust anyone, but not in a pessimistic way or in a negative or in a fearful way. I say it because we are all, and when I say we, I mean me and everyone, because we are one. We're flawed. We don't have control of our emotions. We've seen each other under stress. We see what the world is operating from, a place of power and control. So we have a lot of, why the hell would I trust you, my neighbor, my mom, my dad? I'm sorry, but that's just human nature, is to be alert, be observant. Being observant is such a awesome like psychological trait, like, or scientific observation. Like you can do that. You don't have to be a scientist. I'm not a scientist, but I'm constantly observing or reading about human behavior and also studying myself.
Yeah.
Like,
And
where can I find that in me?
yeah, and I do remember that conversation a little bit. I think it came up because I say that a lot too. I'm like, I don't trust it. I don't trust this idea. This is why I ask a million questions. Like, I just have to, that's just who I am in my nature, you know? And I remember having this conversation with someone and they're like, oh, but I've never given you a reason to not trust me. But I think that term gets like intertwined with like infidelity. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, like not even that. Like, I know how horrible humans can be to one another. And that's what I think we don't trust. But we're working on it, you know, we're not closed off, because if we did, we wouldn't probably have this podcast or like each other. But
Yeah.
it's that trust that we're very skeptical about of our other like human race, you know?
And the solution to that, which Robert Greene talks about, Jordan Peterson, a lot of cool like people that study human behavior. The solution to like, oh, we don't trust people because it sounds pessimistic. Maybe it is. We don't know. Is that accepting others unconditionally, learning to see others unconditionally. It doesn't mean you have to love them unconditionally. I mean, I guess that is the underlying message. It means accept things and people and everything as it is. We don't have control.
Correct.
We're very primitive because we think we have control. So that sucks because that puts us in the state that we're in, is trying to control others, right? We still think that way. Leaders, business corporations, they still think that way. So that's the undertone, or it's just really hard for you to think positively. But once you know that, you can see that like life isn't as crazy. It can be a beautiful thing, but you have to work on changing that perspective. Yeah.
And that's what we're working on.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that idea though, but that's where we're at right now. You know, we're trying to work on our self-awareness, you know, and yeah, it's just always going to be there, but we're working on it. You know, we don't have it mastered, but it's interesting how when we reflect and we talk about it, you know, because yeah, sometimes I think I have this shit figured out and then nope, I start talking to you and I'm like, oh, whoa, I really don't.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't remember the philosopher, but I will find him and I will quote him on our post. But there's a philosopher that said, the more you know, right? This is like a saying, the more you don't know.
Oh yeah.
And there's so much wisdom in that, because the more you get to know yourself, I feel like I've been in a strong relationship with myself for the past 3 to 5 years, like really, you know, just different, like my life, my age, a lot of the circumstances has led to me really having to tap in, and I love it. It came with a lot of chaos, but I've learned kind of like through what's that book we read about the gold, about Egypt?
Alchemist?
Yes. So it's like the Alchemist Theory, right? Like, how does he explain it? Like, you have to what to the metal? An alchemist is someone who. Let me find it.
A year ago. That was a year ago. You're asking me to quote it.
Yeah, but it's what alchemy means. Hold on. So alchemist means a person who practices alchemy. That was helpful. Okay, a person who transforms or creates something through a seemingly magical process. Every time I say seemingly, I say seemingly. So
why are you thinking of sperm?
I wasn't, but I noticed that every time I read it, I'm like, oh, it's not seemingly. But anyways, it's seemingly magical process. Some highly imaginative tax shelters dreamed up by the accounting alchemist. That didn't help. I guess my understanding of it was like how a crystal is formed or something, like under pressure. And so it's kind of the same thing with people's stories, but we have to learn to see it that way. Because I could be like, no, I can't handle it. Like, this is horrible. Jordan Peterson says it is horrible. Life is horrible. he's a little, I don't think life is horrible, but I like the idea of, yeah, it's not going to be easy. Suffering is involved. So embrace the suffering so that you don't suffer more.
And you don't dwell on it and ruminate. Yeah, I kind of jumped the chapter because I know we're almost at the end of this book and maybe we could talk about it, but the death one, we haven't,
oh my God,
we keep saying,
definitely want to talk about that one.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it, that subject. And I know like you and I want to, but we never know how to approach it, right? Because it's like, but
yeah.
I can't wait to read that chapter. I kind of like skimmed through and I'm like, I was like kind of reading that instead of doing my standards on this chapter.
Yeah, you can tell. Just kidding. No, it's a, I've read it, like the chapters that we've gone through, I'll read them like, or listen to them like 4 times. And each time I'm like, oh, okay. I make a new, because it's a lot, he talks a lot of his stuff. I'm like, wait, I gotta process this for a few days because that touched a nerve. Just kidding. But no, for real. They're therapeutic, right? Like the books is like, oh, okay. That makes sense. He says that we all seem polite on the surface, but also dealing with stress. And this is going to bring out the aggressive side in us. So a part of the solutions is to deal with our stressors. And our stressors are just anything. Being a parent, working, traffic, it's not always pain. We've talked about pain in the past and how that can make you act, but like pain and hunger are 2 stressors. We don't think about it, but like under those conditions, an ugly side of us comes out. And
They're
so
hangry. Yeah, that's where that term hangry came from.
Yeah. Your whole chemistry changes. You kind of like the lion who's like after like the zebra friend. It's like, now you're my dinner. Like, I'm sorry, it's not personal. Like, kind of, right? Like, that's kind of how it is. You're like, get away, I need my food. But that's one that I see in kids and adults. We don't make that connection. We just think we're hungry. And you got me into a bad mood, and that's why I'm reacting this way. It's like, no, you're hungry. Take care of yourself. Feed yourself. Don't get into hungry states. And a lot of people do that. Or we're not in control of it, right? Now that I know this, that I just learned, the solution was, let's say that I'm hungry and I can't eat anytime soon. I need to calm down. I'm not used to this emotion. And so I just kind of feed it when it gets like angry, but no, like chill, body. We're going to, you know what I mean? Like, you have to be in control. Take deep breaths, start imagining yourself in positive place, like really switch your frame of thought, because being angry is going to like put you in a weird position, especially if you're around others. You're going to lash out on them. You're going to feel dumb after. That type of stuff. Moving on to the solutions part of the stuff. He says, do not become emotional. Work on reactivity. So again, when someone is coming at us with negative behaviors, it serves us best. It's in our success, right, to not react with our emotions. So I thought a lot about slowing down. I feel like that's something that's kind of starting to come up for me lately, is how we're so reactive. Even, and I don't consider myself a reactive person, but I still, you know what I mean? Like, there's still something kicks up in me where I'm like, ugh. And it's like, no, Cindy.
Yeah.
We are all children of the Lord. So
I think, I'm still trying to master that. But reactive, it's like we're trying to convert that into responding, Reacting is with our emotions, and responding is like stepping back, regulating our emotions, and then approaching it and responding like in an appropriate manner,
Yeah. Like sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, that hangry situation. Like, I've done that so many times because I'm on a schedule too, and if I don't have a snack or something, like I didn't prepare for it, I constantly have to keep reminding myself, like, take deep breaths, drink water, like we're not going to starve to death, just take, like, trying to get back into control of it. because I don't want to say something and that I'm going to regret because it makes me feel like a shitty person after, and I don't think it justifies it. It's like we're getting older, so we have to have, you know what I mean? Like there's no more excuses on our end. Like we
Nice, I
have
love
to
that.
be, we have to be that bigger person and take control or accountability of the things that come out of our mouths, and I just don't want to be like that. So I'm still mastering to respond because I could be very reactive also.
Yeah.
Not a good trait.
Yeah, and again, it's something so simple like hunger. When I talk about this a lot because it used to affect me, but like feeling tired means you're not getting enough sleep, or like people have a lot of sleeping issues. Some people cannot sleep and they still have to wake up early and like they function on that, and like those people are cranky as F. Like no one likes to be around you, bro. And it's not even you. We get it. It's you not taking care of yourself though. And like you said, at some point, we're adults, right? Like we get even more picky, unfortunately, or I don't know if that's a good thing, but we get more like, I can't tolerate this. Like I'm definitely like that. Like you don't take care of yourself. That's why you're unhappy. Love you, got your back, but I can't. Like, what are we? Like it's hard sometimes because people are in a very negative state of mind because they're not taking care of themselves. So you said that under stress, you're reactive.
No, I try not. Yeah.
He says that because it reminded me of you when he said, under stress, we make bad, impulsive decisions.
Oh, good. I'm glad that reminded you of me.
Not necessarily bad, but I remember at one point I'm like, oh my God, you react real, like you would like, I just noticed, right? And we're all like that. You were just very obvious and on it, and that's why I caught it. But like, I don't have that style, but I still find myself all the time, like with my daughter, where I'm like, she's just being a kid, bro, chill. Like take a deep breath. And then I come back out of it where I'm like, all right, cool. And I'm able to like interact with her again. But like, isn't it crazy? Like you get into that, like, I'm tired, like leave me alone. And it's just like, bro, that's how you create childhood traumas, because it's not even, there's nothing wrong. You're just like, work on it, whatever it is that you need, right?
Yeah, definitely. But it's all a work in practice, like I said, all the time. It's never easy, but as long as like we're making these less and less errors, are not even errors, like mistakes, but I own it, I'm like, yeah, I could have made a better choice. I self-reflected and I choose not to act like that, we're all human and going to make mistakes. Cancel culture probably would have canceled us already if they saw the way we raise our kids. They're like, abuse.
Yeah, they will eventually. But yeah, so yes, love that you said that, because it's about, you're going to keep making mistakes. Accept that. It's about every single day. Me right now, like getting ready for like sleep routine, that's stressful. I'm tired as F. I want to just lay down, but I can't do that. And it's like, yeah, so stop being a big baby, basically is what you're doing. Cause it's like, handle your business. You're a mom, you're an adult, just what comes with it. Like, and don't be upset, and start getting calm, and start, there's just like a lot of stuff that when we're working on these things, we really got to break them down into every single day. And we're going to have good days and we're going to have bad days, and we're not perfect. That's, yes, like we need to accept that the bad days are going to happen. And then you just try again the next time. So that's cool. Almost done. So the other one is that he talked about was to tame your aggressive side. So again, we're talking a lot about this behavior as if we see it in others, but it's in us. We all just express it so uniquely. So the other part is also like, because, a lot of this stuff starts bringing up people, right? Or behaviors or situations that we've dealt with. And it's like, bring it back though. Because if you can't master it yourself, you're still going to have an emotional reaction to whoever comes at you. So, just because you can do this to the other, oh, you're probably this, doesn't matter. If you have an emotional reaction, you're going to be impacted as well. And then this other one, my last one is, you're going to be like, that's unrelated, but limiting screen time. And I'll get into why. And when I say screen time, it's like also known as media time. So however you might consume media, whether that's a television, your phone, computer, in public, right? Ads, whatever it is, that's what I'm referring to. I saw this video that was talking a lot about how it kind of seems like right now things are so bad and negative. And it's because we're so attached to our technology or media consumption, right? Again, it doesn't have to be through phone. It can be through the news, whatever. And all of that puts us in a negative state of mind, because just like when we've talked about food, it's about a profit. Food selling is a profit. It's not, people who are creating this food aren't necessarily invested in positive outcomes from their foods. They just want to make a profit. So it's the same idea with media. The more attention any type of outlet gets, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Fox, any ESPN, it doesn't matter. The more attraction of attention, the more profitable you're going to be, because you're going to get to advertise. People are going to want to give you money to talk about the product, to bring people. There's always an intent behind it. And so when we're looking at the media knows that we're going to be invested in things like crime rates, things like what's going on the other side of the world, things like just, it's very negative, and we're attracted to that. And so we're going to tune in, and it's going to keep us, asking for more. And so when you look at the media that way, you can understand this is why you need to limit your screen time. This isn't the enemy. Social media is not the enemy, because that's coming up a lot for me. And I'm like, no, it's us. We are the ones that we're giving this like access to the world tool, but we don't know how to use it. We don't know how to use it to our benefit. And so one of those ways is balancing, just media, because it's going to show us, kind of like with food, like it's going to throw, sugar, what we want, or like all the bad stuff that we want to get us hooked. Because they're going to make a profit off of our attention. So yeah, like there's different tactics you can use with that. You can say during dinner, we don't touch electronics. During Monday from this time to this time, whatever works for you, don't stress yourself out, but just start thinking about how that can also put you in a negative state of mind. And we're already in a negative state of mind. And that just adds a lot more negativity and anxiety and worry, right? Like if you're constantly hearing about killings and crimes and robbery, whatever, you're like, damn, we live in a effed up ass world. And I started to feel like that a little bit. So, and it's like, no, it's not. And how can you tell that it's not? Because when you go into public and you're walking down the street and you see someone walking their dog, and even the homeless person on a bench, and people, it's not even as crazy. It doesn't mean that the stories that they're putting out there are not important. It just means they keep us in that state. That's not healthy. Why wouldn't they report on very positive things that would positively influence our brainwaves?
I like it. Even though it was irrelevant, that was a good point.
That wasn't irrelevant.
That's
like,
I'm just kidding.
We're prone to be aggressive. We're prone, and so limit your stressors. Don't be hungry. And if you're going to be hungry, grow up, figure it out. Or just, we got to check ourselves. That's why I was saying that, because sometimes I'm like glued. I'm like, weird, right? Like, I'm like, oh my God, put the phone away. And I do, like, I'll have to put it away. Like away for, do whatever works. Some people don't charge their phones by their bed or their alarms. And I sleep with my phone like right next to me. And like some people put their, I'm like, I need to get into that. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed our aggressive presentation on Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene.
Yay, I liked it. Good topic. Thanks, guys, for tuning in again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let us know what you think. Are you aggressive? Because science will say that yes, you are. So you should be ashamed of yourself. Just kidding. Okay, bye guys. Love you.
Bye.